A very good evening to you all. On behalf of the Rotary Club of Centennial United, I am very glad to welcome all of you to the third session of the Young Civic Leaders Forum, which is under the Project Youth Decide. And as always, I would like to thank you for your continuous encouragement and support shown towards this program within the last 3 months. And I hope that after today's session, you will also continue to be there in the session and you will gain something very productive for your life in the future. The topic that we have planned for today is the ethical use of media for advocacy, which is a very timely topic in the modern days, both in local and global contexts around the world. The esteemed resource person who is joining with us for this session is Rai Balthasar, who is a prominent media personality, feminist researcher, and an activist of Sri Lanka. She has over a decade of expertise in the field of media, presenting lifestyle-based and entertainment shows in MTV. She has over 10 years of expertise as a live events compere, working for both corporate and the state sector, which makes her an ideal resource person for carrying out today's session with you all. So without further ado, I will invite Rai Balthasar to continue this session. And as per her request, I would like to join you all to participate in this session interactively and without hesitation raise any questions or clarifications that you have within the session with her. And I hope that you have a very rewarding session today. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, thank you very much for making the time to join us and to join me today as I talk to you about ethical use of media for advocacy. Just to also, as I speak to you today, just let you know that I was also an interactor, although it feels like quite a while ago. I spent a lot of time in Interact, I think from the time I was about, for about 7 years really. And it really shaped a lot of what I did thereafter. I'm still very thankful for the networks that it created. I'm very pleased to come back today, many years after I've left Interact and left school, to also talk to a group of people who I know are really, in my mind, have always been a group of people that can shape and change the future. So I'm very glad that you are here. Just to give you a little bit of a background also into the work that I've done. So as Satya mentioned, my work was predominantly my background is in media. I worked at MTV, in which I did a morning show called Good Morning Sri Lanka, which I did for about 10 years. And then towards the latter part of my career at MTV, I also did a few other lifestyle-based programs. A lot of the work that I did thereafter was also in the media space or the entertainment media space. But in the recent past, I think through my education and through the work that I've been doing, I've been also learning and unlearning. So I'm doing a master's in women and gender studies. So you'll see a little bit of that kind of thinking also in today's presentation and what I'm hoping to bring to you today. And also just to expand on this idea, on activism, which I think is really very, very important. I think a lot of you who may also join these kinds of sessions and programs are there because you really do feel like you want to make some kind of difference and change. And then so how do you use the platforms that you are on? Or how do you use your knowledge? Or how do you use your spaces to create the space for the world that we want, right? So that's the kind of conversation that we'd like to be having. And I want to say conversation because I don't see this as like a one-way presentation. I'd really like for you to engage with me and to talk to me. So you can't really have just your microphone switched off for the whole session. I'd like for you to answer some of the questions that I have, and I hope you'll be able to do that, right? So if we can just move on to our slides, maybe. Just before we move on to our first slide, a question that I'd like for you to answer, if you can, is how many, maybe a few of you can answer, where do you get your news from? And, where do you get it from? I'm not talking about necessarily which channel or which page, but where do you get it from? We have a few, websites. So we have Interactor Kulindu who said websites, television. Can a few others let me know where you get it from? Where do you get it? Okay, mainly television. That's Nipun Meegoda. You're saying mainly television. So, okay, social media. Okay, so I'm just also trying to understand where you get your news from before we go into our first slide, which we will show now, which is how the majority of the country, this is just a survey that was done. So if we can take a look at that first slide. So in the survey, it's a survey done last year in 2020 in 25 districts. I think the sample size was about 2,500 people. And it was done on how and where people get their news and current affairs information from, right? So 96% of the population of the data sample size, so this is again trying to understand the larger picture, got their news from television. Radio was 55%, word of mouth was 54%, newspaper was 39%, social media was 31%. Other information sources, which is like WhatsApp and SMS, 14%, and gossip and news websites were 11%. So the reason I wanted to share this with you, the landscape of where we get our information from, to start off with, was because I think we assume maybe kind of as the younger generations, anyone below 40 maybe, because we spend so much time on our phones and kind of engaging on our devices, that most of the time, the majority of the country may, we are very influenced by social media, but how many others are influenced in the same way? So I know Shesha, who joined you at the last session, she spoke on social media and the influence of social media and advocacy. But today we're looking at media in general, right? So as you can see, 96% of the country, in that particular study, specifically, they receive their news from television. So these are the things that shape the minds of people, right? So when we talk of media, what is media? That's a question for you also. What do you classify as media? So there's obviously here on the screen you have TV, radio, newspaper, social media, gossips, news websites. But obviously news websites can be taken as social media also. But so there are different kind of approaches to this, right? So if we move on to the next slide, just going to take you through some core principles of journalism. And this is, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel, so I'm just going to show you just a few ideas, and then we'll talk about these ideas and then everything else, right? So accuracy. Journalists cannot always guarantee truth because you're telling the story of someone else, right? But getting the facts is the cardinal principle of journalism. So we should always strive for accuracy, give all the relevant facts that we have and ensure that they've been checked. We cannot corroborate information. So that's basically about truth and accuracy, right? You can't decide, you can't make up things. Independence. Now this is something that we will talk about a little later on. Journalists must be independent voices. We should not act formally or informally on behalf of special interests, whether political, corporate, or cultural. So I'm going to read that last bit again. We should not act formally or informally on behalf of special interests, whether political, corporate, or cultural. We should declare to our editors or to the audience any of our political affiliations, financial agreements, or personal information that might constitute a conflict of interest. Right? So this is about independence of journalists. So this is these 5 points that I'm sharing are from the Ethical Journalists Network. I've mentioned the source at the bottom because I thought it might be useful as we talk about media to also talk about journalism, which is going to be a good portion of what we're going to be speaking about today. So fairness and impartiality. Most stories have at least 2 sides. Whilst there is no obligation to present every side, every piece, stories should be balanced and add context. Objectivity is not always possible and may not always be desirable in the face of, for example, brutality or inhumanity. But impartial reporting builds trust and confidence. So we see even in our news, especially when they report news, all these slogans, truth first, we report, you decide, right? The idea of truth, the idea of impartiality are central to the idea that these are good and reliable sources. The fourth one, and I think this is something that I'd really like to talk about a lot today, on humanity. Journalists should do no harm. What we publish or broadcast may be hurtful, but we should be aware of the impact our words and images have on the lives of others. And that's something that I want to talk to all of you about, and how you see humanity. Is there humanity in our media spaces at the moment? And lastly, accountability. A sure sign of professionalism and responsible journalism is the ability to hold ourselves accountable. When we commit errors, we must correct them. And our expressions of regret must not be cynical. We listen to the concerns of our audience. We may not change what our readers write or say, but we will always provide remedies when we are unfair. So the idea that you also need to be self-reflective, be self-critical. You say something wrong, the fact that if someone calls you out and you've said something that is incorrect, are you willing to change? Are you willing to rectify that? And are you willing to take a step back? So I think these are very important aspects of journalism in general. And so we'll move on to our next slide. So I want to talk to you about a few categories of how media plays in our everyday life, right? So now I know some of you said that you watch news. I'm not sure. Actually, can I ask how many of you read the newspapers or you read the e-newspapers? Don't feel pressure to say you do if you don't. You can be very honest. Actually, if you don't, you can still say I don't read it. But can a few of you tell me if you read the newspapers or not? Very rarely do people even buy the newspapers now. So I'm just checking with you. Do you guys read the newspapers? Okay, sometimes. So Chaitani has said sometimes, but not that much interest in newspapers. Yeah. So I'm assuming you might be getting your news mostly from social media. Anyone else? Once a week, maybe. Ajmal. Okay, yeah. So I used to, while growing up, I think one of the my family don't buy the newspapers anymore. I don't buy the newspapers anymore because I live away from my parents now. But while growing up, my parents would definitely buy the Sunday newspapers, and that was like a big deal. I'd always liked reading the newspapers. There's something quite different about reading the newspapers as opposed to reading something online. And also the access to Sinhala and English newspapers is always very interesting. Okay, so the reason I asked you that also was, and I'll go into that a little later on, but I want to talk about media and how it plays out in different ways, right? So race and media, and this is quite pertinent now, I think, more than ever. So since, in particular, maybe in the last decade, there's been a lot of focus on race in the media, right? Possibly post the war or the end of the war. There's been a lot of conversation on post 2011 or so, and then with this kind of nationalistic fervor, and then of course in the recent past, the very recent past, with the Easter Sunday attacks. So there's a real focus on race. So how does this play out in the media, right? So one thing that happens is that there can be unnecessary mention of race. So you don't need to mention race in certain spaces. You can just say me pudgalaya or this person, right? But in the end, you end up identifying that person as this, or you identify as a Tamil perpetrator or a Muslim perpetrator, right? Or you say, it seldom goes the other way around, but that generally happens. So the mentioning of, if it's especially something negative, it is mentioned sometimes unnecessarily. There is also a sense of sometimes looking for stories that provoke a racist agenda. And I'm not saying that everyone does this, but there certainly are certain channels and certain newspapers that have that agenda, and there's a lot of information that goes out. And they're flaming fires, right? So I'm going to start giving you little bits of information on what this is. And this you find a lot on social media, right? So you also have information that is incorrect, that is shared, and information that is shared on purpose with malice, that is wrong, right? So I'm just going to show you some slides. I think we can go into one example, so I can just run this through you. I have only a few examples of race and media, simply because there's so much of it on social media already. So this I thought was a really interesting newspaper article. This was just this year, last year rather. It says an unusual increase in Muslim students at Law College in 2012. This came out at the end of last year. And you'll notice that this whole story, like if we're talking about the media, we're talking about print news, that this whole story is conjured up in a very particular manner. It's talking about Muslim students at Law College. Now, truth be told, this article, they are writing about something that was already said by the former SIS director, right? But then you have to also look at how these newspapers use headlines to convey the message. So there are better ways to have maybe talked about this story, that there was an increase of Muslim students in Law College. But is the way in which you report it, is it fair to say an unusual increase? I mean, the whole purpose of this was to show you that this, certain headlines themselves can provoke and incite fear and anger and resentment against the community. So the next slide is also, something far more simplistic. For those who don't read Sinhala, I'm sorry, but let me translate this for you. So there's this very interesting page, and I recommend all of you, if you're on social media, if you're on Facebook, to take a look at Ethics Eye. It's a page that's dedicated to calling out newspapers and other media platforms on saying things that they shouldn't say, right? So this was Ratama Katakala Police Duwage Riya Anatura. But you'll notice that it says Ema Jeep Rate at Laba Dunne Muslim Mitureku Visinda. What relevance does that have to the entire story, right? The story is about a girl who drove a vehicle and met with an accident. But what difference, or what does it make any difference? Yes, they could have just said Ema Jeep Rate at Laba Dunne Miturek Visin. Why the term Muslim? So how do you feel about this? Okay, so Kulindu is saying they're racially profiling people. Ajmal is like, people are getting surprised by seeing doing by Muslim men or another race. Yeah, so that's exactly it. I mean, one thing is it's completely irrelevant, right? It's irrelevant to the whole thing. They didn't even really need to say that the vehicle was given by someone else to start with. And then you put in the word Muslim there. So what connotations does that have? So this is Divina. And it's very interesting that Ethics Eye continuously always shares all the newspapers. They're not very biased with who they share. And they'll share this information. So if you're ever looking for a good resource, a lot of what I have is from Ethics Eye. So I only use I only have two slides on race. But I mean, race is the largest portion of content. So even after in the first lockdown, during the COVID lockdown, you'll notice a lot of the information that came out first in some of the bigger private media institutions were all about particular groups of people being affected by it, right? It was Muslim Qatar. So there are these conversations that have emerged about race. So race is a huge portion of media and how things are narrated, and media plays a massive role in how people from different races and religions are seen, right? Religion too plays a huge part in this. So we'll discuss this a little later, but we'll move on to the next. So this portion I might have put in a few more extra slides because I think this is something that I've enjoyed. So women and media. So women are generally affected in the media in many ways. One is that they're left out of the conversation altogether, right? They're not always included in the conversation on anything for that matter. If you look at talk shows, for instance, talk shows on politics, talk shows on a lot of things that are not entertainment based, like important conversations on economics, on various things. If you make a note of it in your head and you remember this, and the next time you see conversations, you'll see that it's predominantly men on panels, they call them manels now. There are only men on the panels, they call them manels. So on these manels on television, in various events, so sometimes women are just completely left out of the conversation. That itself is a problem of the media, right? It's not only the problems that are with being seen and the sexualization and the objectification and the victim blaming, but the fact that women are not also seen in media is also a problem with the media, right? And it's a larger cultural and structural problem. So leaving women out of the conversation. Then sexualization of the objectification of women. I'll share some examples with you. There are like instances of rape where they'll say "Rumat dahatara," the "Rumat dariya," or they'll say "Rumat kata" or "Rumat kantava," and then they basically make it sound like that was a reason for her to have been raped. And they give that kind of space to it. And then victim blaming, because that's very cultural also. If you get onto a bus and you get harassed, they'll find a way to pin it again on the victim, right? But in the same way, the media also does that, where they'll find, there are multiple examples of that, because you have to also understand that these articles are being written by people. They're not being churned out magically on some kind of, emotionless, feelingless device. They are happening. It is people who are writing and engaging with these spaces. So I think that's also important to acknowledge. And negative reporting, where there is very particular negative reporting on women. So if we can just move on to the first picture. I think this is the one space that I have multiple pictures. So this is very interesting. When you talk about women, so it's පිරිමි දෙදෙනෙක් පැනලා ගිහින් නව දෙනෙක් අත්අඩංගුවට පස්සේ කාන්තාවන් 8 දෙනෙකු සහ එක් පිරිමි පුද්ගලෙක්. So it's the focus here is the fact that women also did this. It wasn't it's not that 9 people were taken into custody for doing it, but women, 8 of those people were women. So the objectification also of women and the emphasis that women should do is very cultural, but that's also interesting. So Kantavan Ismat, so that's what Ethics Eye has also pointed out. Kantavan Ismat Manda. Why is it important? So you'll see this, like party raids or anything to do with drinking or smoking, anything that is considered immoral. There's a moral benchmark for women in media and women culturally. So if women do something that is against the moral kind of, so if this is where we stand, and this is a benchmark, or this is a line. If women do anything against that, then automatically they are going to be spoken of in a very particular way, and the media really goes to town. This is from Divaina. Our next, again, this is on excise offences. So over 3,000 women have been rounded up for various related offences by the Department of Excise during the countrywide detection complete in third quarter of this year, with a total seizure of illicit goods worth up to 121 million. Now this is actually off the Daily Mirror social media website, but also it ran with that article in the newspaper. So 300,000 women arrested. You can see that there's a focus on women and how they have been arrested, because if there were 300,000 men arrested, the question is, would they say it the same way? They would say 300,000 persons, right? So imagine if it was only men who were arrested. They will say 300,000 persons have been rounded up for various related offences. But you have 300,000 women, and so they title it 300,000 women. The focus on that is because the women, it's women and alcohol, right? So they shouldn't go together. because there's a moral dilemma there. And that's why the media chooses to create a very unnecessary negative storyline about it. Now, you may have your own biases, right? All of those of you who are with us today, all of you as the youth, you may have your own bias about drinking, about alcohol, about smoking. We all do, right? But media institutions have to be held accountable in a very different way, and they can't be the moral police. I think that's what we need to understand. So we'll move on to the next slide, and I'll show you a few more examples. So this is Mehemat Ammavaru. Again, going back to this is Silumina. Ampara ප්‍රදේශයේ මවක් සිය එකම 14 හැවිරි දිනයට වඳසත් කමක් සිදු කර තරුණයෙකු සමග නිවසේ ජීවත් වන්නට ඉඩ දුන් අපේ කාලේ කිසිදා නොඇසූ කතාවක්. Right? Now this is interesting because you look at the picture. Right? Now Ethics Eye has blurted out that picture, that face, and put a red dot on it. That was on the newspaper itself. Right? So they are saying ඡායාරූපය වින්දිතයාගේ. So if the picture was of the victim, wouldn't that be unfair by the victim? If the image they are using is not of the victim, what is the purpose of it? මොකක්ද මේකේ තියෙන අදාළත්වය? Right? So look at how now there's a girl who's 14, but look at the image that they've used. So probably like some Indian stock picture of some actress, right? What is the relevance? අදාළත්වය මොකක්ද? What is the relevance? Why are they using that picture? Because it's kind of a sexy picture, right? I can't see her face, she may not look 14, but she's got her shawl all the way up here, it's a side picture. Like, look at the way in which they want to portray her. They want to represent her in media. So they don't have a picture of her. They could have easily not included a picture at all, right? But they choose to include a very sexy picture of probably someone who is quite attractive, right? And this is this is Silumina. It's from last year, from last November. So I have a few more. So we'll go through the next. So again, this is, like I said at the beginning, parties, morally incorrect for girls to go to. So 52, this is different newspapers reporting the same thing. Ethics Eye does this, and I think it's very fascinating. So Daily Mirror, this is 2021. This is very recent. 54% including 13 girls arrested for partying illegally. 54. Then in the other one it says 52 arrested at a rave in Madirigiriya. Party goers included 39 boys and 13 girls. So I'm always trying to be fair because they're like different. Madirigiriya hotel matsadayak, right? So now there's alcohol at this party, right? Taruna Tarunayo visi panas dekas dari, right? So look at how that's Aruna. But look at how Daily Mirror frames that. 54% including, right? Including 13 girls. So girls and alcohol, what did I say before? Girls and anything that goes against the moral, cultural grain. You're going to be reported in a very particular way, right? Can we take a look at our next slide? So this is, Ethics Eye did this graph. This is basically from the 10th month, from the 1st to the 23rd. We're going back to that slide. Just give us a second. From the 1st to the 23rd of October, this is from the Sinhala newspapers. How many times that they've used, this is especially in relation to COVID, right? How they've used certain terms. Corona Kata, Corona Sudha, Corona Manamali, Corona Gabini Mava, right? So using Corona as an adjective to describe a person. Because at the end of the day, COVID, I think a lot of the reason, and this is very true even to date, a lot of the reason people didn't want to be honest about their COVID positivity was simply because the media would follow them. So at the beginning, I think you all remember while we were all in lockdown, they called her Corona Katha, the very first woman from Minuwangoda from Brandix who was who was the first person who they recognized as creating the second wave. Then they went and spoke to her. They basically destroyed her life. They called her multiple things, including a sex worker. They said that she had relationships with. Media concocted massive stories around this one person, right? And that she did give like her end of the story, which another paper then carried, right? Hot gossip. And so the conversations on Corona, on COVID, has always been there's a lot of stigma, and so people don't want to go to hospitals and say, I don't know if you remember, but I mean. That young girl from the Jayawardhanapura campus who was taken in, and the media followed her, and they didn't. Many of them didn't blur her face, and if they did blur her face, you'll notice that the blur moves. So she's still recognizable. So remember that ethics of journalism and humanity. Where's the humanity in that, right? Like you. So Ajmal says, why are women always given barriers? If all the things you said earlier are done by men, then yeah. So I think those are very cultural, Ajmal. It's the media gives us a platform to talk about things that are already there in our cultural setup. But the way in which sometimes that information comes out can be very scary. And the reason that we're sharing all these examples with you today is because we're talking about advocacy, right? What can we do as individuals? What can we do to change this, right? But we're talking about really big organizations. We're talking about big newspapers. So what do we, as the youth, how do we engage? So I just want to run these ideas by you, so that when we come to that conversation, you'll have a better idea of why it's so important that we don't stay quiet, right? So 9 times Lankadeepa has used the term, one of these terms. Aruna, that's a subsidiary of Derana, they have used it twice. Divina, Maubima, and Dinamina and Silumini hadn't used it even once. If we can go to the next slide. So this is this is a fun one. Do we have any girls? This was a few years ago actually, but it made its round, the rounds again about maybe about 3 months ago, and again it blew up on social media. But it's originally from a little while before that also. It's about 2 years ago that it originally came out. Batahira Veedi Andumen Market Yara Kurunduwatte Alut Nonala. And what are they talking about, right? They're talking about being able to purchase Kanta Saniparaksha purchase sanitary napkins, and how you can just pick it off a shelf and take it home. So this is a man, by the way, who wrote this. No woman in her right mind may write about sanitary napkins being available on a shelf. Sorry guys, I don't mean to sound sexist, but it's there, right? And these are the people who represent our thoughts, right? The media it works both ways. The media reflects our thoughts, and we also give a platform for the media to pull out things and then use for their story. So what does this say? I'd really like to hear what you guys think about what this says. So it says, Mevana vita sampradayika gami sanskrutika aakalpawalin ketaram pitapana tibeda. So the idea that wearing sanitary napkins or buying a sanitary napkin off a shelf is a gami sanskrutiyata pita, or against or away from the lifestyle of someone who live in a village. So this is media. This is Satyaga Aruna. This is a Sunday. Mind you, I'm mentioning these names because these are already up there, and these are things that they've published. So I'm not trying to make one newspaper or one TV channel look bad. I'm sharing multiple things on multiple platforms. I want to. I'm sharing multiple articles because I want you to get a sense that this is happening all over. English papers, Sinhala papers. Unfortunately, I don't read Tamil papers, so I can't pull out examples. This I thought was also very interesting in how we represent class and media, right? class through media rather. During the pandemic in particular, there was a very interesting way in which we started speaking about class. And it happened in a very unofficial kind of way. So you started talking about particular communities in a very negative way. I don't have this image, but the one image that I think was really, and I looked for it quite a bit today while I was preparing for this presentation, was that image of the Natamis in Peta, the community on whose backs we built our economies on. If you go into Peta and you're familiar with the area, you know that without the Natamis, Peta does not function. Right? They are the ones who either carry things on their backs or they pull the cart. And no matter how big and fancy a system you have in Colombo, nothing ever gets done without the Natamis. Right? They run the whole system. So during the first lockdown, they discovered that there were a few people who were on the street and also Natamis who may have been affected by COVID. So they were put into these lines, and there were images. That the media was invited as they were publicly disinfected. Right? So they were lined up and they were sprayed with disinfectant. They were given new clothes, a sarong and a shirt for the men and women. There weren't too many women standing in line, it was predominantly men. And so I remember reading a lot of what was said on social media of the stories that were shared on television. So it's usually shared on the news and then reshared on the social media pages of those news areas. Okay, so you saw that, Nipun, yeah. What did you feel, Nipun, when you saw that? Because I think these are really important things for us to understand. Like, I had a lot of friends who saw it and were like, this is great. The government has taken control. They're looking at people. At least they're giving them something to wear. They're being, and I think that's a really interesting way of looking at class, where we feel like those who are poor, who are from certain communities in Colombo, or from certain communities across the island, that it's okay for them to be represented in the media in a particular way, right? Because they have no dignity and they have that their lives have such little value that it doesn't matter. I'd like to see, if it was a house in Colombo 7, for instance, right? And I use this example. But would they have, if a neighborhood in Colombo, for a lack of a better word, like a posher space in Colombo, would they have been lined up in the same way? Would they have invited the media to come and watch the disinfection of the masses? Would you have allowed that? Right? The answer is no, you wouldn't have. In fact, there were multiple apartment buildings in Colombo in which there were so many problems, but obviously there were no media, there were no cameras at those spaces because their class protected them. But if you're poor, you're underprivileged, then you are seen as not being able to have any dignity. The media doesn't see you as being worthy enough of having dignity, right? So it's a basic human right. So I'd like to share with you a few examples. So this was a really interesting article. This was Daily Mirror. I pulled this out because I think the heading I felt was quite classist. Estate workers, they actually changed this right afterwards because there was a little bit of a hoo-ha. But estate workers seen here in long queues in the Dikoya-based hospital premises without maintaining 1 meter distance and adhering to health guidelines. Actually, the article, I think this they edited, but initially it said taking risks for granted. Like these people in this area were taking risks for granted, right? But if you really look at it, you could have retitled this, Dikoya Base Hospital has little infrastructure, leaving many in Dikoya without facilities. Or you could have rephrased that. The media could have rephrased it, but they chose to use what they thought was a sexier sexier heading. But I think it also reflects class. You know, when you're talking about people who are underprivileged in the way in which you're talking about it, it's very classist. Can we show the next one also? Okay, so this was horrific. Did any of you see this? So Swarnavahini showed this. Kahanama notaka pitavagiya ayetta labunu danduwama. Right? And it was a video of a Natami whose offense was having traveled back to his to a relative's village. And the article, the news piece actually used words like ohuwa vatakara, right? This idea that he was surrounded, grahaniyata asukara gatta. Those are the terms that they used in their news item. And I thought that was really horrific. And look at what the neighbors did. They put a polythene bag over his head. And the police also, so the media also portrays it. But I think what was interesting was that the media in this instance wasn't empathetic towards this man. I mean, we as outsiders, as we saw it, we all cringed, right? We were all like, what is happening here? But the media that chose to air this was like, this is punishment. And they were okay with this vigilante justice. They were okay with him having a bag over his head. They were the way in which the story was pitched, and I mean, a lot of these things still exist on social media. It's really difficult because not too many people pointed out that this wasn't quite right. But the way in which they talked about this instance was very problematic. They talked about it because he was like he'd done this massive thing that was wrong, and he deserved what was happening. So I think in both these instances, what it shows is class, right? You're not going to, that was a weekend, mind you, that multiple people from Colombo were taking, they were like, we're so done with the lockdown. And who had taken trips out of Colombo with their friends. But you weren't showing pictures of them with polythene bags over their heads. So what does this talk, I mean, how does media represent class, right? So I think that's really important. As we look at these things, I hope you get a sense of where I'm coming from. So I've talked about women, I've talked about race, I talk about class, and bringing all of these things together so that when we talk about what we can do, we need to be conscious of what is already wrong. So that's kind of why I'm still going ahead with these different portions. So we'll move on to the next category, which is politics and media. So I'm using something, this is the source of which is Verite Research, which is a reputed research company. And this is something they say of media institutions, right? Frequency and airwaves used by media to broadcast content are regarded as public property. That's something we should all know. So if you're seeing something on television, it's broadcasted, be it state or be it a private media institution, it's still considered public property, right? The airwaves used to broadcast media. It is a principle in law that all public property must be held and used in trust for the benefit of the general public, regardless of whether the property is held or used by state or private institutions. Accordingly, media stations that enjoy the privilege of using public frequencies and airwaves are subject to a correspondingly great obligation to be sensitive to the rights and the interests of the public. Currently, there is no specific law or regulation which governs the pricing and transparency of political ads during election periods. Consequently, democratic interests are vulnerable to be flouted instead of being supported by the media. So the reason I want to talk about politics is to also share with you, like if you watch television, generally it's quite interesting. In a lot of the research work we do, in the work that I do now, I tend to ask people what channel they watch. Because based on what channel they watch, sometimes, unless you're in a place that has very little coverage and there are only 2 or 3 options, it can also tell you what their political interests might be, right? So if you know they watch Sirasa, there's a particular political ontology. If you're watching Berana, there's another particular ontology. If you're watching a mix of Berana and Hiru, there's another political ontology. So there's a little bit of noise not being in the room because we all understand what these things unofficially mean, right? What do they mean? If you're watching Or if you're reading a particular paper, what does that mean, right? If you're watching state media and that is the only source of news you're getting, I remember my parents at one point watching 3 news channels, and not because they felt like, and then they pick out which ones they like from which channel. So 7 o'clock Sirasa News, 8 o'clock Swarnavahini News, and I don't even remember what they watched at 9. But they pick out, right? So you can tell a lot about people's politics based on the news they watch. Try it. Go ask your friends and their families, and you might be able to link things up. Your TV channels in particular, I think even more than newspapers, have an ability to impact how you see things, right? So imagine you watch X TV channel, whatever the TV channel is, and those are the thoughts and the emotions you go to sleep with, right? So you watch something that incites fear and anger and hatred, that's what you go to sleep with, right? You watch something that talks of a particular community in a very negative way, that's what you go to sleep with. And then if you do that every day, 3-4 days a week, that's what you go to sleep with. So it's this idea that you're constantly being fed information, right? Be it private or state channel. And radio also, but radio I think we'll talk about in a bit. But politics and media, so why is this important? If we can go to the next slide, I'd just like to share with you a graph. So this is the presidential election, news coverage of candidates between the 14th of October and the 12th of November. This is also was shared by Ethicside. And it's based on data collected from primetime news telecasts, selected Sinhala language TV channels, right? So you look at the channels and the amount of TV coverage they were given. So this is not me being biased or in any way. These are facts and figures, right? So there's no problem in sharing this info. So you'll see the number of seconds that people have been, the different candidates, 3 candidates from 3 parties have been given on the media. So the first 2 channels, predominantly you see giving a preference to one candidate. You see at the time, because the state media was not in his hands at the time, so you'll see a reverse. But you'll also look at but the gap between state media is quite obvious, where there is a gap. It's only the ruling party at the time that has the opportunity to use state, and everyone else much less. And the other 2 spaces, the first 2 private media institutions, a much bigger space in their airtime, right? And then you also look at the third candidate, right? And how little time. I think on the first channel it's so few seconds, and then it keeps shrinking. Yeah. So this is basically the month in which the election took place, right? So how little. And the reason I'm pointing this out is because this is how narratives are created, right? So we want to talk about what can we do. We want to talk about advocacy. We also have to understand what's in the minds of people. And what's in the minds of people is what people are being fed by the media. So if you hear a name of somebody over and over again, and in this case there are 2 names, right? But how then does this play out in a fair election, right? It's also very interesting I don't know how many of you know about how media works, but most of what this is just a presidential election, but if you look at a general election, a Mahamadiwan, it's interesting in how these things, how much time is given, because you also pay for your advertising, right? So the state media sometimes, and different media institutions, there are rate cards, what they call rate cards. And there are rate cards that are offered, especially in time for a general election or even provincial council or local government. And different media institutions charges different rates. And sometimes they charge different rates to different candidates. So if you're If you are a candidate from X political party, you may be given a different red card to thank you to someone from another political party, right? And that can create a sense of imbalance, right? So just try to see if you also can understand that there is an imbalance in how, if the media isn't giving you space, so you're, okay, so assuming you're a young, aspiring politician, right? You're not from the two main parties. You want to create a new space for yourself. Do you think you're going to be given time on media? Do you think you have your face is going to be seen? Before every election, as the youth, we talk about creating new political cultures, all of these new words coming, right? This is a presidential, but we'll talk about politics in general. We talk about creating new spaces. Whose voices are being heard in our mainstream media spaces? Only the people who can afford to pay millions and millions and millions of rupees to have their faces on television. So are those people always the people who represent our interests? That's a question that I'm not going to answer. That's a question that you have to answer for yourself. So I think that's an interesting way of looking at it. So now that I've painted this really gloom and doom, horrible picture, we're going to move on to what we can do, right? So as young people, what do we do? What is my role in all of this? Social media is so much easier, right? I mean, I kind of envy the fact that Sesh got that was able to talk to you about social media, because it's so much easier. I have control over my social media. I know what I can send. I may be able to grow my audience. I may be able to connect. I might be able to put up a post that goes viral. I might be able to use community groups. But what do I do about this big media? What do I do, right? It seems so big and so intimidating. Like, do I have to be a journalist to be able to make a change? I mean, you could, but that isn't for everyone, right? So here's what you can do. So number one is you can fact check. There are multiple pages on social media. Don't forget, a lot of the content, it gets a lot of the, like I said, over 90% of the country still get their news via mainstream media, so via television, not via social media, right? So there are lots of pages on social media that offer fact-checking services, right? And sometimes if something's getting a lot of traction, you can very easily, so things that are shared on mainstream media often get reshared on social media pages, right? So okay, so say you're talking about Swarna Vahini, for instance, right? Whatever they share in their main news bulletin will also go on their social media, and sometimes they take shorter clips of it and they edit it and they share it, right? Same with Derana, Sirasa, they all do it, right? So some of their content, if you feel like there's something wrong with it, or you know that someone shares a fact and it might not be right, maybe it's wise to fact check, right? You can fact check it and then maybe share that information instead. Okay. The other way you can do something is using social media to counter what is being said already. Because you don't have access to media, and it's not like you're going to walk into Derana or Sirasa or Swarna Vahini or Hiru or any of those channels, theatre, and then you're not going to be able to say anything. But you can use your social media to counter what is happening in the larger media spaces, right? Be it something on radio, be it something you heard on radio, something you saw on TV, something you read in the newspapers. You can use your media spaces to talk about something that you think is wrong. I mean, that's a space that most of us have left because we're not anymore linked to organizations. We don't work in those spaces and we don't have access to those spaces. You can do letters to editors and so on, but I think they're a little, they're not things that maybe the youth engage with as much, right? But I think that's also interesting, and that's my next fact is holding media institutions accountable, right? How do we hold them accountable? So we can use social media to hold them accountable. There are petitions that can be signed. there are different ways in which you can really push that conversation, right? It's not easy to go up against big organizations, but it doesn't mean that you can't be a part of various protests or very online protests or physical protests, or I mean, if protests might sound quite scary, but kind of a voice against, right? You can still choose to do that. The fourth point, I think, is something that we really need to think about, right? So if you want to make change, you have to understand and acknowledge how much you're being fed. What are you being fed by the media, right? How much of what you do in your life is changed by what you're seeing and hearing and reading, right? But you also have to understand that you're only seeing one side, even though in the beginning we spoke of journalism and how journalism requires you to look at all sides of the story and be empathetic to all of these things. You also have to understand, if you're reading, watching, hearing certain things, you're only hearing one biased opinion, right? So you also have to acknowledge then, and then it becomes your responsibility to widen the discourse, right? So this sounds, I know, like a bit of a broad term. How do we do this, right? So if you're hearing something from one news channel, for instance, you can use your spaces, be it through school, through your interact clubs, to talk about it from another angle. You can see that happening now, right? Because through media, you're hearing certain things on burial rights. You're hearing certain things on monuments being taken down. You're hearing certain things, and you can see how the state media will talk about differently. Certain ethnic groups that have different medias will talk about it differently. But it is your responsibility as a sensible citizen who's looking at democracy and a real democracy. You need to be able to widen the discourse and hear the conversations from not just here, but also from here, and understand everything between, right? If you're only hearing one side and you're not paying attention to the other, I think, I mean, as an example, with the monument in Jaffna, the Mullawaikal, the monument being taken down, the state media talked about it in a very small way, but a very particular way. And then you had Tamilnet talking about it in a completely different way. So you need to be able to say, this is one end, this is another end, but there's also something in between. That becomes your responsibility. What can you do? You have to learn about the in-between. You have to learn about the two ends and the in-between. I'm not saying either of the ends are wrong either, but that's something that you will learn, because you have to learn to unlearn. That's my final thing that I'd like to talk to you about, learning to unlearn. In media, the media will feed you a lot of things, and sometimes it takes you many years to unlearn what you have been taught through your education systems, through your schools, and through the media. You're taught a lot of things, and sometimes you need to unlearn those things to be able to do what is right. So when you're talking about advocacy, you're talking about making change, you're talking about democracy, you're talking about all these big cool things that you want to do for the country, that you want to do for your school, that you want to, you want to do to make things right. You also have to understand the very, very vital and crucial role that media plays. But don't be exasperated by it. Don't be fearful of it. The media can also be your friend. And I think, yes, it's a difficult space, but you also have to learn that there are portions of it that is still humane. So you go back and you look at all the examples that I've shared today, and you ask yourself, how much empathy is there in the stories we tell, right? How much goodness, kindness, and empathy is there? Are we sharing? If you look at the news every day, you'll probably feel like you're in a very negative space. I came here with someone today who said that they were so upset by everything that was going on, that he was going to leave the country. And it made me very sad. He was possibly about 21 years old, and he said, there's no future left for me. I didn't know him. We were just talking on our way. But I think a lot of people feel like that, because that's also a lot of what the media tells us, about how bad the situation really is. The situation might be very bleak, but we also have to find ways in which we can make it better. And it doesn't serve us a purpose, doesn't serve anyone a purpose for us to say, we are a very small person in this larger scale, and there's nothing that I can do to contribute to making a difference. The media is something that we have to grapple with, and we have to also question. We have to protest against, but we also have to use when we can. So it's a very complex relationship, and a relationship as you grow older, and that perhaps you learn to negotiate better. But at the moment, I can just tell you that you shouldn't be afraid of the space, but you should really question what you see. Just because it's on media or on social media, it doesn't mean that it's the absolute truth. So question everything, learn to unlearn, and be fearless with everything that you do.